So hello, everyone, and welcome to our session. I think what we're going to be discussing today is very apropos because, as you all know, in 2020, schools around the world experienced massive disruption due to a forced transition to digital, distance learning, as we all grappled with a global pandemic. So as we begin this new year, it's important to take a step back and examine the many ways we can evolve the status quo in education to prepare students for a drastically different future. So as part of this effort, Green School International, a sustainable K-12 school with campuses in Bali, New Zealand, and most recently South Africa, is launching its year-long School for Now series, a collection of conversations bringing together experts in sustainability and education to discuss how we can use both to better prepare the youth of today for the demands of tomorrow. I spent time at Green School Bali just last year as an activist in residence, and it was a transformational experience, not just for my children, but also for my husband and myself. And it felt like a community like no other that I'd ever experienced before. And watching my children have an educational experience that was as academic as it was emotional, the support that they had, the confidence that they gained was truly a blessing. So because of my time witnessing firsthand Green School's approach to education, and as well my family's work advocating and advancing ethical and eco-conscious education through Earth Echo International, I was thrilled when the school invited me to moderate today's panel. So today I'm joined by Sal Gordon, who's head of school at Green School Bali, Courtney Kimmel, who's vice president at the Captain Planet Foundation, Elizabeth Crawford, who's associate professor at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. She's also a global education researcher and author, and an SDG advocate. Joining us today also is Kinvara Jardine Paterson, who's a senior campaign manager at World's Largest Lesson at Project Everyone. And finally, Mike Long, who's director of operations at Parley for the Oceans. So to introduce today's topic, I want to show you a video demonstrating what teaching the Sustainable Development Goals looks like in action at Green School, now with locations in Bali, New Zealand, and South Africa.
In project-based learning and thematic classes, especially, students get to identify which SDGs that their projects are going to impact and which ones they are working to solve. And I think that's a very good way of bringing them to the forefront of people's minds. If we are going to regenerate a lot of our ecosystems, these are some good places to start and some good questions to start answering. The Student Ocean Ambassador program has done a number of projects that relate directly to some of the SDGs, mainly the number 14, life below the water, but also thematic classes in grade 9, for example, have studied the business impact of free clean water, and so that would be number 6. Very often you can identify a whole bunch of SDGs that would work really well with any one of our projects or classes. So it's important to really focus on trying to impact one or two of them and really get the kids to answer some really interesting questions or even ask some interesting questions about them. So one project that springs to mind is Gooday's Final Straw project, where whenever we went surfing we would go past warungs that had plastic straws in coconuts for sale. The way he approached it was very simple and effective. Whenever we went to the beach surfing, he would ask the warungs what kind of straws they had. If they didn't have paper straws, if they had plastic straws, he would offer them bamboo straws, a cleaner, and a little bottle of bio soap, which they could use to clean them with, to offer to their clients. And also a small poster making them see the impact that it would have on them as a positive warung making a difference.
People always say that Bali is a paradise, but when you live here, you see close details, like every rainy season, you see tons of plastic coming out of the river. And the truth is, Bali does have a plastic problem. Me and my dad started the Final Straw project, which is basically We go to Warungs and distribute bamboo straws, and in exchange, they give us plastic straws. So the idea behind this Find a Straw project was we always go to Warungs, and the first thing they gave us when we buy drink is plastic straws. And we felt guilty and kind of sad because like we've been learning about how turtles eat plastic straws and stuff like that. So we started to find ways of how we can help to help community reduce plastic straws. So my dream is that to reduce plastic waste, but what I want to leave behind in this world is that for people to care about the environment and to save marine life under the ocean.
I think what G'day ended up with was a really nice view to how, no matter how young you are, no matter how simple your idea is, if you believe in what you're doing, it can really make a difference.
So before we jump into the how and why of implementing sustainable development goals in K-12 curriculum, I'd like to provide a refresher for everyone listening on what these goals are and why they were created. So Kinvara, why don't you enlighten us?
Thanks, Alexandra. Hi, it's great to be here, and I'm really excited to be speaking with everyone on the panel today. So essentially, I think one way we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, is thinking about them as a to-do list for the planet. They're a set of challenges that we need to achieve by the year 2030 that was signed by all 193 member states of the UN. And they're unique and ambitious in that they have set within them each goal's targets that we need to achieve in order to complete them as a whole. And particularly this deadline of the year 2030, which is approaching and coming incredibly fast. So it's really important that we are able to share the goals with everyone and that everyone can have the opportunity to learn about them and take action for them.
It's an extremely hopeful idea to think we could accomplish all 17 of these important goals. Sal, the video gave us a taste of how Green School uses the SDGs in its curriculum. Why did you choose to do this? And why is it so important to give students this framework?
I think there's two things that that Green School really stands for. One being an innovative model of education. So to redefine what a school is and does. But that other, shining spotlight at Green School is that we're not just a community of learners, not just a different model of schooling, but everything we do is trying to make our world sustainable. So this concept of a sustainable future, I mean, what's the alternative? If there is no other alternative for us, and we believe that we can make a difference and can make a change, then by allowing our opportunities for our students to learn about the real world in terms of sustainable development is really the key to us solving a lot of global problems at the moment. The SDGs in themselves I love the way Kinvara talked about them as a to-do list. We've definitely used them as a lens within how we design learning programs. Not just designing learning programs, but learning experiences for the whole community. We think of the SDGs as a systems thinking lens that allows us to redefine what's most important to be learned whilst at school, what's most important to be focusing on. We're not just designing at Green School, we're not just designing some new innovative, non-traditional learning program. Sustainability is in our DNA, so to speak, and is it's a common thread across Green School Bali. So when we're talking about developing a new model of learning and B, moving towards a sustainable future, well, we'd be silly not to use a blueprint like the Sustainable Development Goals that they've given us. They're giving us a challenge. It's a big and beautiful calling, these goals, this to-do list that we've got on our hands, and a better and more sustainable future. I mean, bring that on and bring that into schools. If you want to design a school, what do you want your students to learn? What do you want it to look like? What do you want it to do as a community? Then sustainable development and a sustainable future should be key answering those questions.
So Elizabeth, you've spent years working with public school educators to implement the UN SDGs into their curriculum. And you recently co-authored a book on the subject. So tell us what motivated you to take up this work.
So I never planned to become a teacher. I loved animals and I've always cared deeply about environmental conservation. I grew up admiring Jane Goodall and decided to pursue a career in primatology, which led to my majoring in anthropology with a French minor in college. So an opportunity arose to teach English in France, and I instead fell in love with children and teaching. So when I returned to the United States, I tried to bring the world into my classroom to my 5th grade students. This is well before social media and the SDGs, of course, but I kept this work going when I became a teacher educator. About 10 years ago, I saw a video that changed my life. It was Zoe Weil's TED Talk, "The World Becomes What You Teach." And it calls us to think about what is the purpose of schooling. And this speaks to what Sal just said. And that was a key moment for me to think about, what am I doing as a teacher educator, and what kind of educators do we want to prepare so that they can nurture these global competencies and dispositions like compassion and responsibility in children. And so when the SDGs were enacted in 2015, I completely revisioned all my courses. I line every course through the lens of the SDGs because I feel that they give us a broader vision of the purpose of schooling and the kind of education that we need to create for children.
And Kinvara, you also help teachers use the SDGs in their classrooms around the world. Tell us about your work with World's Largest Lesson.
Yeah, so I think with us at World's Largest Lesson, what we're trying to do is use the SDGs as a framework for helping kids to be inspired to take action for things that they see that they want to improve in their local communities, for example. And I think for us, really, what we try and do is we're trying to, through a partnership, an incredible partnership with UNICEF, we have the ability to reach kids in over 130 countries around the world. So we're providing students and young people with an opportunity to have this global learning who may not otherwise have ever had it. And so really what we try and do is make it seem something that is easy and accessible to implement into schools, into classrooms, so that everyone has the opportunity to learn and feel like they can take action for it. And really that is weaving in throughout all the programs and the resources that we make, this element of curiosity and creativity, and helping children realize they have the innate skills already within them to stand up and take action for the goals, and knowing that it's a global framework can help them feel inspired to do so, because it's not just them who's working on it. There's children all throughout the world who are learning about it too.
Courtney, Captain Planet Foundation is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, so congratulations. The organization spent the first 25 years working with educators, but now you're also working directly with youth to be problem solvers for the planet. Can you tell us a bit more about your work and why it's important to our discussion today?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. It's interesting as I listen to Sal and then to Elizabeth, they're sort of threading the needle, right, in working with schools. So you can reinvent school and sort of take this wholly different approach, which is amazing. Working with public education, specifically in the US, there's a lot of very specific standards and, scope and sequence and all these things that you have to sort of accommodate and work into, which can make it really challenging. So for the first 25 years, the Captain Planet Foundation was really focused on building, tools and resources and grants and other things for primarily public educators to be the conduit to youth and to students, right? So how can we give you resources to help you take students outside, which was great and wonderful. But I would say about 5 years ago, there was a shift, and I would say this has a lot to do with that shift, right? Where you have a lot of really passionate young people around the world who have the information, right? And who are rightfully impatient for action. And they have a lot of what we used to be able to provide, they have. The question is, what do they do with it? And how do we put that to work in a constructive and effective way? So about 5 years ago, Captain Planet Foundation partnered with lonely whale. And actually, we've worked with a couple of folks on this call to bring about Ocean Heroes Bootcamp, which was really our first sort of step into how do we take young people who have this information, who are passionate, and help them develop the skills to be effective advocates. And this is really adult stuff. It's how do we change markets? How do we change policy? And it's really focused on, for that particular program, it's focused on SDG 14 and sort of the marine SDGs, but that same framework works for other goals. So we're looking at how do we take that framework, that advocacy skills training, and bring it to other areas. So it's been exciting work, and it's taken us into working with very just remarkable young people around the world who are making this difference.
Remarkable indeed. So speaking of oceans, we're also joined today by an organization near to my heart as an ocean conservationist, which is Parley for the Oceans. Mike, obviously it's easier for students and teachers in a place like Bali, surrounded by the oceans, to see and understand the importance of protecting marine environments, which account for more than 70% of the planet's surface. So for everyone else, tell us more about your work and how protecting our oceans extends to goals beyond just SDG 14, which is life below water.
Thanks, Alexandra. Yeah, such an inspiring panel. It's really nice to be here with you all. Thanks for inviting us. Yeah, just to take a step back, I mean, Parley was created because this great blue universe, this over 70% of our surface, was under threat and still is. And we knew that the problems that this planet faced, the problems that we face as humanity, had become far more complex than any one environmental organization could solve, or any one government, or any one law. And so we really created this collaboration space, this space to invite business leaders, government, innovators, designers, influencers, athletes, artists, to come and sort of paint a new picture of strategy and of innovation, of eco-innovation, we like to say, to protect the beauty and fragility of our oceans. And with that said, I go back to one of somebody who's very well respected in our world, your grandfather, Alexandra, who said people protect what they love. And I think that's been sort of the underlying current of Parley all along, is how can we make the ocean accessible to all? The ocean is our great connector. And how can we connect people to the sea? How can we connect youth in a way that really drives solutions to these challenges? And through our education program, we are not looking just to create a curriculum by any stretch. We are looking to inspire and empower and engage youth on a whole nother level. And I'll give you an example, and this brings back the point, Alexandra, around Bali and kids living near the ocean or kids living inland, and what does that mean? And how are they connected to the sea? And when we first landed in the Maldives, you have 1,192 islands surrounded by the Indian Ocean, and these postage stamp islands, and these kids living on these islands who we found had never seen their house reef, who had never seen their natural playground. They have not ventured out of that classroom and into one of the most beautiful coral ecosystems on the planet. And working with our government partners there and these amazing individuals and key stakeholders, we began a program, a task of getting kids out of the classroom and into the ocean. And what that did for them is it allowed them to go home and influence not only their classmates and their school and their teachers, their educators, but also their parents. And that's really, for us, the game changer. Kids are smart these days. They have the power to influence business. They have the power to influence government. And for Parley, our education program is really trying to unite all youth around the world by the ocean, by activism, by mission-driven education, and really sort of look at new ways to promote innovative learning. And that's really sort of the premise of how we operate at Parley, that kids are our greatest educators at the end of the day.
You know, as I'm hearing you all talk about your work, it occurs to me that there are so many different ways to approach using the SDGs to inspire the next generation of change makers. Kinvara, given your work in classrooms across multiple global contexts, I'd love for you to share a bit more about how different countries approach this differently.
Yeah, for sure. So I think really, no matter the country, the context, the classroom, it really is driven by the children and what they are inspired and motivated by. We've seen our program and the work we do implemented in many different countries. And what will happen is the children and the students will be introduced to the SDGs, and then they wait. Mike, I love what you said about getting the learning out of the classroom and taking it outside. And that's what will happen. The students will go outside, they take the learning outside, and really they start honing in on the SDGs that are relevant to them and their context. You know, they might live in a community that is feeling the impacts of climate change more acutely than other parts of the world. And so that would be the area that they zone in on, or potentially they're in a community or a school that's been heavily impacted by the refugee crisis. So I think no matter where, no matter the country or no matter what the context, it's developed and led by the children and what they are interested in, the context that they see happening around them. But I think one thing that we do hear from the educators and the teachers in our community is that one barrier to entry sometimes with this work is that they feel like they need the support of the senior leadership and the support of senior leaders in their schools and, you know, at the governmental level to impart this learning. Because unfortunately, sometimes you are in a community or in a classroom where the educators have got so much going on, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to help their students learn to read and write and to pass a test. And there isn't an exam for international mindedness. There isn't an exam for climate change. And I'm not by any means saying that there should be, but it is sometimes that they need the support of their senior leadership and those high above them, so that teachers feel like they are empowered to teach and could teach their students about this. And that's why it's so great what Courtney was saying with the introduction of, you know, online and the mobile phones. Kids are getting this learning and they're demanding for it now. And so really, I think I just go back to the point that it's led by the children and what they care about. And that's what we've seen, particularly in the last few years about climate change, and the incredible upswell of action and support that there has been from young people demanding that they need to learn about it and that action needs to be taken.
Absolutely. But I imagine that this can be an overwhelming concept if it's approached incorrectly in any classroom. Sal, how does Green School navigate teaching the SDGs in a way that inspires students rather than frighten or overwhelm them?
Yeah, good question, Alexandra. But, you know, we love the idea that we come into our power as humans by starting with awareness, and awareness of sort of ourselves, awareness of humans, other humans around me, who I am in a community, and an awareness of the incredible environment that we're a part of, not just on top of or that exists around us, but a part of the environment. So at Green School, with that concept of awareness and self-awareness, you know, at Green School, we like to take children through this process of enlightened awareness, almost, in the point of how they connect and who they are as a point of nature. You know, starting with the idea, we like to talk about our younger kids as being children of the earth that are learning about the earth and connecting to the earth, and getting older, becoming guardians of the earth. And then even further, and getting older, becoming warriors of the earth. So we have children, guardians and warriors of the earth. And we're seeing the environment and the community immediately around us, especially at a place like Green School Bali, where we're a wall-less, beautiful bamboo structure, garden, jungle, river, rice fields, campus. We're immediately connecting our learning experiences with the students to form that connection. It might be a little bit easier, I suppose. You know, that we do specifically focus some of our units more so as students get older, but focus a unit of work, a 6-week or a 10-week unit of work at Green School on one SDG. So I know our grade 7s love doing the poverty, eliminate poverty. I think it's SDG 1. The grade 7s, a lot of their thematic units are focused on health and well-being, so poverty. They do a great hunger and nutrition that links the 2nd and 3rd SDG as well. and our younger students then might be doing something a little bit more nature-based and connecting. So they'll be doing ocean thematics, life on land thematics, looking at renewable energy in terms of maybe water as a central theme to that as well. So we're definitely not throwing climate change and the result of, you know, civilization that's gone wrong at our students, but we definitely, as students get older, that become more aware of the issues. So say you get into middle school, we know that our middle school grades 6, 7 and 8, they're 11, 12, 13-year-olds, they're starting to ask questions, they're smart, they know what's going on. They're becoming guardians of the earth. They're developing life skills, they're developing mindsets, and they focus explicitly on solving a lot of these problems within a real world context. Our high school students, it becomes even more complex and more full on. I love to talk about some of the things in the high school. When we talk about sustainability, you know, we often think about just nature-based sustainability, but there are so many different factors, and that's what's good about the SDGs, that it does break it up into a different lens, into a to-do list. But I love the way our high school students have developed a tradition at Green School for V-Day, which is on Valentine's Day. But in high school, V-Day stands for Violence Against Women Day. And we all learn together and share together and reflect, and we end up dancing together on our field to celebrate gender equity, to celebrate a community that stands together for the wrongs in terms of gender. And the students have created that themselves. So it goes across the school, from our young students forming a connection with nature, learning about nature, learning who they are in nature, to our middle school students that are starting to question and starting to wanting to do something about this, to our high school students that really do things that make a difference in the world and make the world a more sustainable place.
Well, it's wonderful to see Green School's example, Sal.
It's not just I think important, Alexandra, just to add that it's not just sort of, you know, you go to a lesson and you learn about a sustainable development goal. When it's embedded into the community, into the thread of the community, things like a biobus system, which Green School has got, which has solved 2 problems in once, comes out of a learning program that benefits a community. Things like a Bye Bye Plastic Bags comes out, things like its own recycling centre, or its solar water system, its Operation Rain or Shine, where we built our own huge solar catchment area and dug tanks in. It's embedded in the whole community and how a community works together. So it's not just about going to a lesson, coming to school, going to a lesson and learning about a goal. It's more than even just making a difference relative to that goal, but it's how a community works together, learns together, and makes a difference and makes the world a more sustainable place.
No, and I lived that with all of you at Green School, and it's a truly remarkable thing to see these young people taking, you know, the problem in their own hands and finding their own solutions and being able to implement those real world solutions as children. But public schools often face roadblocks when it comes to innovation that private schools like Green School don't. So I'm wondering, Elizabeth, if you can speak to that.
Yes, thank you. Public school teachers certainly do have less autonomy at times. They may have pacing guides they have to follow that are aligned with benchmark testing or prepackaged curricula that their district adopts. But what I try to do in my role as a teacher educator is to help them see the opportunities to integrate these local and global issues into their existing curriculum. And with the SDGs, the opportunities are limitless. And so to start, there's a really helpful publication UNESCO released on SDG learning objectives. And so if you're looking at all the SDGs, you can naturally find the concepts that you are already teaching in science and social studies and language arts and math, and find ways to naturally integrate the SDGs with what you're already doing, but enhance what you're doing. And so to tell a quick story, my teachers go out into the field during their practicum experience, and they design and implement SDG aligned unit plans that align with the North Carolina standards. And a few years ago, my pre-service teachers were working with a school in Jacksonville, North Carolina, where they had a set pacing guide. And so my students were given the standards that the teachers had planned to teach. And their task was to determine how to align these with the SDGs. And so a second grade classroom was teaching about production, distribution, and consumption, geography, other economic concepts, supply and demand. In science, they were teaching about sound. And so they were given all these concepts, and my students determined that the world's declining bee population aligned beautifully with all those concepts. And so what they did is they designed an integrated unit plan aligned with the SDGs in a way to meet the mandates that they were under and do it in a more meaningful way. And so the children chose how to take action. They planted a pollinator garden at the school. We invited the local news media. The children, these second graders, were interviewed by the news, and they got to teach the community about the importance of pollinators and what we can do to protect them. So that's just an example of how public school teachers can naturally integrate the SDGs and find opportunities for addressing them within their context.
That's an amazing story. So zooming in a bit more, I'd love to hear some of you share how you've seen this approach shape the students and young people that you've worked with. Sal, can you share a story from Green School?
Where do I start? I don't know. I talked a little bit about B-Day, and I love talking about B-Day in terms of sustainable development and gender equity. We've got some really cool local scholar students. I don't know if you know that at Green School there's 36 LSP, they're local scholar students, Balinese students. I think it's more kids on scholarship at Green School Bali than all the other international schools in Indonesia combined. We don't believe that we want to be an international school in a bubble. We need to stay connected and learn from and with our local community. So our local scholars are really important people in our community. They add so much, we learn so much together with them. There's a high school student at the moment, I suppose, that's going an extra yard with a clean water project, and his name's Dipta. He's bringing clean drinking water to his village at the moment, rather than them having to go buy it. So he's doing a water filtration project. There's another LSP kid. I didn't even bother writing notes for this section because I thought there's so many examples. His name's Hazel, and he's been involved in our Student Ocean Ambassadors program, which you know well. And he's started his own Clean the Ocean project as well. We've had some, the obvious answer is, bye-bye plastic bags. The movement that started as a middle school thematic idea has basically banned single-use plastic bag on the island. Clover Hogan, I don't know if people know, but Clover Hogan's come through Green School Bali and is now a climate activist and researcher on eco-anxiety, founder of Force of Nature, beautiful human. Ruby Burke has internalized SDGs. She's an amazing graduate from a couple of years ago who's started up a zero waste living initiative, and I think she's working for an environmental company in Melbourne right now. The list sort of goes on and on and on in terms of taking a learning experience of a normal school like Green School and making it meaningful and important to an individual. Meaningful right now for them, meaningful in a point that they are able to do something with that learning right now, rather than to sort of learn something because you might use it later on in life, which is most of the education I got. Providing opportunities for the students to learn something, to connect with nature, to solve a problem and to make a difference, to be a change maker. There are examples across Green School Bali on a day-to-day basis. I love the way our grade 12 students stand up and deliver in front of 1,000 people in a TED Talk style. And all of those talks have a sustainable development theme to them, whether they're personal, whether they're economical, whether they're social or environmental. Our grade 8 students as well have a passion project. That's our type of exam at Green School Bali. We don't sit down and do a standardized test. We tell the world what we're doing with our learning right now. And I love to see our students across the school every year get up and talk about how they're making the world a more sustainable place.
Yeah, that is one of the truly incredible aspects of green school is the ability of the students to articulate their learning in ways that are real and immediate and inspiring to others. You don't often find places that give young people that opportunity. And in fact, my daughter, who was 9 years old, after a month at Green School, was inspired to stand up in front of the whole school and give a speech about what that meant to her. So it's, I think it's a very profound and important part of education for every child. But Courtney, you must have a lot of stories of inspiring youth working at Captain Planet Foundation.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment. One of the things that I'm hearing everybody sort of mention is that I think what's effective is not starting with it as here are this, SDGs, like this is this global agenda that's coming down from the top, really, but more starting with what are the problems in your community? Like what are the things that affect us all, and how do you see that in your life, right? Whether it's plastic or it's marine life or it's pollinators or it's whatever it is. What is the thing you see in your life, and how do you know it's a problem? How can you articulate that problem? And then how can you see yourself as part of the solution? And I know with Captain Planet Foundation, across the board, our programs all end in action, right? Because it's one thing to say, oh, this is a problem. That's too bad. Like, this is for someone else to deal with. But it's a very different thing to say. And here is the solution that I, as a 12-year-old or I as a 9-year-old or whatever, I'm going to bring forward. And I'm now part of the solution. And I think, what we often talk about internally is the opposite of that, like saying, oh, this is a problem, and we're going to just say it's a problem is sort of justifying or in some ways validating that apathy is an acceptable response, which is that's a really scary future, right? And I think that may be partially where we are. That apathy is, these are too complex of issues, and that's too much for us to deal with. So, that's for someone else to deal with. Whereas if we can take that empathy and spark it into action and sort of start young people on a path of meaningful action that gets to solutions, that's a very different future. And so that's the sort of the crux of the programs that we've been developing. And it's really about how do we identify that solution, identify the problem, articulate that it is a problem, and then design and implement a solution that gets us closer down the road to a better future. And then we can say, and oh, by the way, this isn't just you, like you are part of something much larger. You are part of these global sustainable development goals that everybody is working to be part of the solution. So that's like our big picture approach in a lot of this. But yeah, to your point, like there's so many great examples. We have a young brother and sister team in Kisumu, Kenya right now, who have decided that dealing with plastic pollution in Lake Victoria is their new, like, that's what they are about. And they started out, didn't know where to start. And they've started talking with partners in their village, and even have gotten up to the sort of national level. And everybody's just so supportive of the work that they're doing. And, however they can help, it's amazing that, I was talking to their mom, and she said, they didn't realize they could walk into a government building and be listened to, be heard, right? And this is what we always tell young people. It's like, your youngness is your superpower. You have an ability to create change today that you will not have in 10 years, because it's very different for me to walk into that building than it is for a 12, 14-year-old. So it's just amazing when you give young people the tools to recognize and sort of embrace their own agency, the power that provides. So we've had young people, we did a program recently. There was a ballot initiative in Colorado in the US around reintroduction of the gray wolf as part of a state policy. And we built a program about young people finding their voice, to be a voice for the ecosystem. So it really wasn't about it was the biology, but it was, how do you be part of the civic process? How do you, use your voice to give a voice to ecosystems and species? The Ocean Heroes program that we've had young people go in and speak with Delta Airlines, they eliminated their single-use plastics in flight because of just consistent pressure from these young people. I mean, partially, we'll see what it was. But yeah, like I said, it's just amazing when you help when you help people realize their own agency. That's where we really see the magic happen.
No, there's no doubt that young people are so inspiring. And when each of these incredible efforts is taken together, I think that's when we can start to see real impact. So I'm curious, Kinvara, Elizabeth, tell us about some of the impact that you've witnessed through your work.
Sure. Well, I think first of all, I completely, Courtney, echo with what you're saying, and how, giving children the tools to supply themselves and realizing the agency that they themselves have. And I think that has been the biggest impact that we have seen. And out of hundreds of stories, it's always the very, very personal ones that stay with me. And an example of that is we just got sent messages on Twitter from a teacher in Jordan who had participated in a community walk with her students to go out into their community and talk to people and kind of identify and spot what some of the issues were. And really what they came across was a widower refugee and her 4 children who lived at the bottom of their school. And they spoke with her and they were trying to ascertain what they could do to help her. And she said the biggest thing was that she just didn't have enough food to feed her children. And so the kids went back and they thought, okay, what can we do? And so they decided to do a bake sale and raise money. But instead of just giving her the money, so it would just be like a financial transaction, they spoke with her and they said, okay, what would help you? What's the biggest impact that we can have? And for her, it was providing food for her children. So the school community used that money to buy 3 goats, and which was given to the widower, and she was able to own them, and she had them, and she was able to use the milk to feed her children, and any leftover milk she then sold on to the students of the school. So they're creating this kind of community together where they're, everyone's helping with each other within that. So that's just an example of a story where the children are having to really think holistically about what they can do and make, close the gap, make it a cycle that benefits from everyone. And I think another just very, very other example is from a school in the UAE where one kid suddenly realized that they were just wasting so much food at lunchtime, and that's because the bin bags were black. So the kids couldn't see how much food was being wasted. So they just said, what happens if we use see-through bin bags? Then everyone in the school canteen would see how much food we're wasting. And by doing that, immediately made children think about their food choices and how much food they were throwing away and wasting. And I think that's just an example of, and building on Courtney, what you said, like giving students and children the idea that they have the permission to say something, that they have the permission to make a change and to use their voice. And through that, it's often, the quietest voices will have the best ideas, because kids see the world sometimes in a way that's incredibly simple, and we can get very bogged down in the systems of how things be, but children can be like, oh, you can't see the bin, so of course that means that we're wasting more food. Why don't you make it transparent, and then everyone can see how much their wastage they're doing, and then they will stop doing it. So I think it's this idea of just building the agency and this idea that permission that kids can say and have a say, that is really some of the biggest impact that we've seen.
And similarly, I appreciate that Courtney brought up empathy, because that idea of empathy to action is really powerful. Recently, I was a guest speaker in a kindergarten classroom teaching about plastic pollution. And I brought in this tub of plastic trash that a friend of mine, Bonnie Monteleone, who co-founded the Plastic Ocean Project, had actually collected in the different ocean gyres. And the children were transfixed by these images of animals, and then the tangible materials they saw in front of them of toothbrushes and plastic water bottle caps, and thinking about whose waste is this, and the idea that we're all interconnected, and that something you throw away here in Wilmington, North Carolina could end up on a shore in the ocean somewhere else, affecting the life in that ocean. And so later that evening, after that lesson, I received an email from a mother thanking me for introducing this to the children, and that her son was so moved and also upset by learning about this issue that he wanted to do something about it. So he asked his teacher if they could do a beach cleanup. And so all these kindergartners got on a bus and went to Carolina Beach, and as part of their service learning, did a beach cleanup. And then that led to conversations with the PTA. What can we do at our school to be more sustainable? And so that year they sold reusable straws. And so that money would then go to fund sustainable projects. And then following that experience, the school adopted the SDGs as a framework for the entire school for their service learning program. And all of this started with this spark in that child. And so I think what's important is to think about different issues will matter to different children, will care about different issues. And it's a matter of finding out what your children care about and what they can actually do something about. It's unfair to present these daunting problems to them if they can't actually have a voice and take action. But if you can find ways to do that, the children are really motivated and want to make a difference.
Well, Mike, I know that Parley Ocean School's approach to education is all about empowering young people, something I know Green School believes in as well. So what does it look like to put the power to create change into a young person's hands, and why is that so important?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just all this conversation, there's so much consistency in it around just giving youth the microphone, giving them their voice and not standing in the way as adults so often do. I was thinking when Sal was talking, he mentioned Hazel. I had the privilege of camping under the stars with Hazel for 4 nights on the North Shore of Oahu at our Ocean Uprise Youth Leadership Summit. We brought, about 30 kids from all over the world for 4 nights and 3 days of just immersion. And, Sal even mentioned with the Green School, not just immersion with nature, but immersion with themselves. And I think finding that human to human connection, we have to love ourselves before we start loving the planet. And I think one of the things and the underlying goals of Parley is to really, connect the youth with each other and give them the tools, empower them with that, with that inspiration, with the tools of engagement. To go out there and make change, to have their microphone, and like as you guys mentioned earlier, to have their superpower or find their superpower. One of the things we learned on the North Shore is that we could put an adult program together. This wasn't a way to just educate youth about the oceans. This was a way to bring in some of the world's thought leaders, some of the world's innovators, key scientists, and have them not teach the kids, but share their passions, share their stories, tell their stories in a way that really led to these kids getting out there and finding their voice, which Hazel did and many of the other kids that were there did. And, you bring somebody like Nainoa Thompson in from Polynesian Voyaging Society to tell his story around celestial navigation and his connection with the ocean and so much time at sea and how that's played such an important role in his life. And you bring in Dr. Cliff Capono, surfer scientist, to tell the story of the microbiome and how he's using science to tell stories of his ancestors. You bring in Dr. Ian Kerr of Snotbot to talk about how innovation in robotics can drive education and research around whales in our oceans. Anyway, it just fills these kids, I think, with so much inspiration and engagement, and allows them to sort of work with each other, not just work with us, but work with each other to develop goals along the SDGs. I look at the SDG goals, and Parley does not just, as Sal mentioned, yes, it's a to-do list, but a do-good list as well. And it's just been really inspiring to watch, these kids over the last 7 or 8 years throughout Parley's work and certainly all the partnerships we have on the ground that are really working in the trenches around education each and every day. It's been really inspiring to watch how not just a child can change, but a community can change. It's great. So
yeah, it is. And that's that's an amazing experience for any child to be able to participate in that. And I think it would create lifelong change for them in terms of what they think they're able to accomplish.
Yeah, I think just one quick story, and I mentioned this before, one of the most inspiring times in my life is when I held hands with two fully clothed, 9-year-old Muslim girls swimming under the ocean for the first time with a mask and snorkel on, and they saw their playground, that coral reef, their house reef, and all the fish and the coral life, and to just look back and watch them and watch the grin on their face and the awe and the inspiration really enlightened me in a whole new way. So I think we're all doing amazing work, and I look forward to keeping in touch with each and every one of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap up, I'd like to leave our listeners with some tangible next steps. So if a parent, teacher, or student asked you today how they can help advance the use of SDGs in education, where would you point them?
I mean, from my perspective, I would say listen to what makes them spark, right? Like, what do they love? Because as someone said earlier, you can't say what you don't love, and you can't force that. So I would say figure out what really makes that young person tick, and then figure out where does that align and how can they become part of something larger.
For me, it's about making a sustainable future part of the agenda. It just needs to be part of our everyday life. It needs to be something that governments are talking about, that it's in our media, that we need to saturate. There is no other alternative. It needs to be something that they're talking about at the temple down the road from where I'm at, or at the mosque, but it especially needs to be in schools. If we're talking about real life learning, if we're talking about skills and mindsets, the sustainable development goals provide opportunities and, in a way, force us to start integrating learning experiences to provide learning opportunities that are real world learning opportunities, that are meaningful, that can happen now. Make a sustainable future a priority at your organization and at your school.
I would add to that to find like-minded educators and organizations. That phrase, "we're better together," is really true. And sometimes you can feel alone in your school as a teacher if you're the only one doing this. But there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of educators around the world who are just as passionate as you are doing this work, so you can find them. There's so many networks online like Teach SDGs, where you can partner with teachers, or the World's Largest Lesson, and to find those educators to support you and to support each other.
One tangible action I would say is, I've said this to schools and kids before and they always love it, is just to switch your web browser to Ecosia, which helps restore and replant forests around the world. And when kids know that they can do that, they get super excited about it. And it's a great way to potentially move away from some of the huge tech conglomerates and instead take action by just supporting through changing your web browser, particularly in this world where, unfortunately, at the moment, a lot of learning is happening online and we are stuck with our screens. So why not take action for the goals whilst using the internet and looking something up?
Absolutely. And actually, if they love the oceans, they can use sealegacy.blue, which is like Ecosia, but is all about restoring oceans. So there's more and more options out there, which are really exciting. So thank you for all of this advice, everyone, and all of your insight. And for anyone listening who wants to get involved and support the work that you do, please tell us where they can find you. Sal, do you want to start? I think we're supposed to round robin this one.
You can find more about Green School at Green School website. 3 different campuses: Bali, New Zealand, and South Africa. Come and learn more about what we're doing.
You can find me at captainplanetfoundation.org, or we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I think.
You can follow me on Twitter at Teach Global Ed, and also on the 100 website, 100.org.
And you can find all about us at the World's Largest Lesson across all social media on @the-world's-lesson.
You can find Parley at parley.tv, www.parley.tv. And I invite each and every one of you to reach out to us at info@parley.tv if you have any questions, and join our Ocean Uprise and educational movement for the oceans. Thanks.
Well, with the breadth and depth of expertise on this panel, I feel like we could continue this conversation for hours, but unfortunately our time has come to an end. I want to thank Green School Bali for bringing this very amazing panel of experts on teaching SDGs together, and my sincere gratitude to each of you for all the important work that you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.